Our Responsibility, Our Promise is a task force report from the Task Force on Strengthening Educator Preparation that was released in December of 2012. It essentially was the call to action by chiefs to their fellow chiefs to use their influence and authority over three key policy levers to strengthen educator preparation. So to strengthen both teacher and principal preparation. These two recommendations on your screen, numbers 9 and 10, are the two that fall under data systems. And so the recommendations really pushed on chiefs and on state education agencies to see their data systems that they were developing. Years ago, there were a number of states benefiting from Race to the Top money that were using those dollars to revamp, revise, reimagine their statewide data systems and data collection. And then a whole host of other states, sort of in line with the teacher prep regulations that had been looming around data collection that was going to be necessary, had started to dig into their teacher prep data systems. But these recommendations really sort of call out the opportunity for states to collect data to understand how well their teacher prep programs were performing. And by performing, I mean producing candidates that were going to fill their teacher workforce. So the first one, number 9 there on the slide, essentially says that states will develop, the recommendation is that they should, and support state level governance structures to guide the confidential and secure data collection, analysis, and reporting. And so to these questions around privacy issues and challenges there, you could imagine that states that then took up this charge and were trying to implement this recommendation really did have to stop and focus and think about the issues around confidential and secure collection of information for teachers and for teacher prep programs. Additionally, the other one, number 10, was around the use of multiple measures for both accountability and improvement. What we were really proud to see is that states really did sort of take that one pretty seriously, and it caused a lot of exploration and investigation into what would be the right combination of multiple measures and conversations about weighting and how we could provide public assurance that when we use the different measures we're using, that the decisions we then make are valid and reliable decisions about program performance and effectiveness. These recommendations come from the Promises to Keep document. So this was the companion document produced by CEDAR that went alongside Our Responsibility, Our Promise. And these recommendations tended to be much more specific, less broad than the ones in Our Responsibility, Our Promise, and much more focused and specific to the programs. So where Our Responsibility, Our Promise audience was really for the state education agencies, Promises to Keep is really designed for the ed prep programs to sort of think about, in this system of data collection, analysis, and reporting, where the state has some responsibilities, but the ed prep programs also have some responsibilities, what is our role to play as ed prep? And so these 4 come from the Promises to Keep document. Those are ensuring that the process includes data on performance in teaching diverse learners, including students with disabilities, which can be fed back to programs for improvement. Identifying and incorporating metrics for program performance that are based in part on the impact of graduates on the outcomes of diverse learners. Building systems that integrate data from the beginning of pre-service to the post-initial licensure teaching to progress teacher monitoring and supporting their development across the continuum. And then the preparation providers be provided with supply and demand data for special educators in the state. And again, because CEDAR and their focus is on students with different abilities, this focus on special education, on students with diverse learning needs are really privileged, right, in the language here. But I think about the importance of this for all students as well, right? So these have implications for all candidates that we prepare for teaching each student, regardless of ability or culture or background or language.
Our company's been doing work now for, I think, 5 years or so, specifically on helping states to develop accountability and also program improvement systems based on good data. And we were involved with CCSSO's NTEP network for 4 years. The potential for this is, at least in theory, great. And states enter into this idea of building a system and a system of multiple measures because it would be incredibly useful to have really great data for program accountability if you were in a state agency. data that would enable you to validly compare the performance of different programs, but data also that can guide program improvement. So it's not just data that's going to be helpful for the state, but data hopefully that will be helpful to people in the programs and that they can use for their own continuous program improvement purposes completely independently of an accountability. The other thing that we've tried to do and we've tried to advocate is that there are other interested stakeholders, and these might be prospective teacher candidates, but these are also policymakers and educators and education leaders and political leaders who all have something at stake in the need for teacher preparation programs to produce quality teachers. And so we've tried to develop and help states develop a system of data of multiple measures that it's going to serve multiple purposes and that ultimately helps teacher production produce more effective teachers and satisfy teacher demand statewide. So that's the goal and the potential. The potential, unfortunately, is greater than the reality at this moment. But there are many states that continue to work on this. Currently in Illinois, we have a multi-year contract there, and it's been really heartening to see the progress that they've started to make in that direction. So there are, as you all know, challenges in this. And the biggest challenge is ensuring that the data are adequate. That's a function both of the quality of data, quality of assessments that the data is based on. Another challenge is providing sufficient time. When a state policy comes down, they want it to happen tomorrow. Not a week from now, not a month from now. And one of the challenges is to buy enough time. And the other thing that you have to do is you have to be realistic about the fact that you're not going to have ideal data. Everything won't be perfect. There will be problems. And you need to build a system that you know is good as you can do, a system that has flaws, but at the same time, hopefully maintain the trust and confidence of the stakeholders in a system that's not perfect. Another issue is you're doing this for accountability purposes. The state has to figure out what the right approach to accountability is. And does that mean, as was a proposal on the part of the U.S. Department of Education, classifying states into 3 or 4 categories and threatening to withhold funding from programs that are rated too low? Or does it involve an approach that maybe is a little bit less hard-nosed than that approach and trying to definitely hold programs accountable, but not threatening closure or not threatening draconian sanctions and helping programs work to improve and requiring that they do improve? The next challenge is that there are differences in wanting data for accountability and not data for program improvement. And some of that has to do with the grain size. Programs, I think, would love to have data on each individual student because they know their students and they would be interested in knowing how students who they assess a certain way are doing on teaching their classes or how well they're doing in staying in the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really difficult to get that kind of data, both for privacy purposes and also just feasibility issues. And accountability data can be data that's too gross if you're not careful for programs to be able to use it for program improvement. The challenges are, again, the quality and availability of the data, especially on program completers. That's especially hard to get. Obtaining data that's appropriately granular, both for comparing programs, but also for working at the program level and not just an institutional level. Also ensuring the representativeness of data. How do we know that the data we have really represents how our candidates or our completers are doing? And when you have a difficult time tracking completers, many of whom might go out of state or in private schools, you don't have necessarily representative data. The other thing is it's really important to use rigorous and comparable assessments. And sometimes data, including some value-added data, are based on local assessments. And those are not often comparable and not often rigorous. And it's not clear what you're really finding from data based on assessments that are not rigorous. Finally, you need to have data that are information rich. A lot of states are collecting data on pass rate. Pass rate doesn't tell you very much at all, mostly because pass rates are artificially inflated, but also it's just not a very rich measure. And another thing that's important is that sometimes there are not huge differences in the mean scores of programs on various kinds of measures, like how well the students may be teaching in the classroom. So it becomes really important to look at the distribution of how candidates score, because the last thing a program wants to do is to put out a lot of teachers whose performance is subpar. Even if the average is great, putting out a substantial number of teachers who are not great, you're not serving the needs of the students who are going to have those teachers. That's sort of in a nutshell. We put together a system. This was our suggestion for a set of about 12 indicators for program improvement purposes. We've gotten a lot of mileage out of it, and we've organized a lot of our thinking around this. We've presented it probably 20 or 25 different states. If you go on the TPA website, and it's www.tpanalytics.org, you can find that, and you can find some other resources as well that give you more insight. The biggest challenge is, again, getting good data. And this is a wish list, and there's no state that can fulfill the entire wish list. And so, again, every state that goes into this and every state that wants to try to get solid data for program improvement and accountability is going to have to face the fact that they're not going to have a perfect system. And you're going to have to do the best with what you've got and hopefully gain buy-in and hopefully, nevertheless, get a lot of good mileage out of the system that you've put in place.